So hello and welcome to season 12 of the Mundane to Magical online summit series. My name is Louise Matson, and as always, I am truly blessed to be your host. I'm really excited to share today's live call as I welcome back to the show a much loved returning speaker, Davyd Farrell. As you know, Nora Watkins Spirits was unable to attend her live call yesterday, and that has now been rescheduled for Friday, the 11th October. And the new registration link is underneath the upcoming calls picture on the upcoming calls page. However, that said, everything is perfect and in perfect timing, and today's call is no exception. With so much going on energetically and astrologically, I'm really excited to hear what Davyd has to share. Davyd's conversations are always so rich and deep, with so many layers to the energetic transmission, weaving in the stellar nations work with the astrology, plant consciousness, and so much more, as he shares the wisdom of the stars worked in with everything else that we are experiencing and the energies of this time. For those of you who don't know Davyd, he is a quantum plant alchemist and co-founder of the Quantum Planet Healing and Quantum Planet World websites. And he's a renowned quantum healer and works with the higher intelligence of plants, elementals, and the angelic realms, doing powerful remote healings for people. He is a former student of Dr. Mac Manaway and hosts a variety of astrological plant and healing podcasts on his YouTube channel, all of which are well worth visiting and exploring. Now, the topic for today's conversation is preparing the way for your multidimensional future, how to find your new earth silver thread. As I've shared yesterday, and as many of you know, the energies we are currently experiencing are incredible. They can really feel challenging at times, but the level of challenge directly relates to how we are perceiving them, through which lens we are looking through. Our multidimensional lens, or our 3D physical body lens. And as always, it's easy to get swept up by the energies and feel victim to them. However, we are in a position to prepare ourselves always and in all ways. And nothing really ever happens to us, as was mentioned in the discussion with Rebecca. Everything that happens in our outer reality is a reflection of our internal landscape, and it's just an offering for us to move forward and evolve. So it's really up to us to navigate these energies and to direct the direction of travel onto our highest timelines, onto our highest new earth timelines. And so I'm excited to hear what Davyd has to share regarding the preparation we can all involve ourselves in. As always, feel free to make comments and ask questions as we go along, and I'll weave them into the conversation as well as I can. And so without further ado, it truly is an honor and a pleasure to welcome you back to the show, Davyd.
Thank you so much, Lou. I love doing these pieces with you for your summit. And yeah, you've already brought up so many points that we were discussing ourselves, but before we jumped onto this call, what is it we want to put out in this transmission? And there's so much that we could talk about. These are incredibly challenging times, and want to try and address today some of the things that could be coming up, even for ourselves, as hosts for this kind of work, but also for the collective, maybe for people who are not so awake, maybe people who are not awake at all. Because one of the things I want to put into the transmission at the beginning here is where one goes, we all go. We all agreed to be a part of this together in many different ways. The good guys, the bad guys, however we want to look at all of this, it's all part of what we agreed to. And that really, the reason I'm putting that in at the beginning is because what I would like to share is about polarity and division. And if we are still in that place, then we're not really starting to get to the place of the multidimensional awareness, which is something we already are, really, so we have to deal a lot with paradoxes. We have to deal a lot with these kinds of dualistic ideas because we're in the dualistic world, but also how to deal with them from a non-dual perspective. So first of all, I want to say hi, everybody. It's a wonderful honor to be here again. I can't believe the introduction Lou gave me. That's far better than anything I could have come up with myself. So thank you, sister, for that. And yeah, the conversation can go in a number of different ways today, Lou. And I know that whenever me and you do these things, we try to channel and let the energy flow through and see where the conversation wants to go. And yeah, I gave you a title many moons ago, I think, for this presentation. And I had to check in this morning with Lou to check what that was. And we were joking. It's like, oh, thank goodness my higher future self was already on top of it, because what we had already put into the mix was exactly perfect for today. So this is also something else perhaps to put into this conversation at this point as we set the tone for the rest of the conversation today, which is that everything is always perfect. It's always divinely timed. And the more that we're in the flow and the place of trust and surrender, the more the magic can happen, the more the synchronicities can happen, all of which is part of our higher divine selves, pointing us to the rest of ourselves that we want to remember. So that's my little piece to introduce today, Lou. How would you like us to start tackling this? Is there anything that you would like to really get into first?
I think probably a good place to start is just sharing what your perception is of when we talk about, stepping into our multidimensional self. What does that actually look like? I know what it looks like for me, but I'm not sure, many of the audience may have a variety of understandings of what that looks like. And so, just to kind of to bring that to the fore, what would you like to share around what multidimensionality is, and when we're in that space, what does that get to look like?
That's a very good question. It's quite a difficult question to answer in many ways, because we're still living very much here in the third dimension. At least we perceive that we're living here in the third dimension. All of this is somehow I can tap the wall and it makes a noise and I think that it's real, and I'm chatting to you on the other side of Zoom. And, one of the things that I'm going to put out there again today is there's a phrase that goes something like this: if a tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it, did it really fall? We'll never know, right? And that's a very kind of quantum way of looking at things. And I want to put that in because we're seeing many things now in the alternative media, which is really the new mainstream media, I would suggest, because the mainstream media has been such a vehicle for propaganda, which in its own way does serve a purpose too. But if I didn't turn on my social media feeds and I just lived here in this wonderful space on the land and didn't connect, is any of that stuff really real for me? Well, maybe, maybe not. Which leads me to my next point, which is, as somebody who's very psychic, very empathic, does a lot of the same kind of work as you, it's what I've been doing for a long time, is clearing the fields of what I would call the density, the things that don't serve us. We traditionally would put this down to emotional pain beings such as demonic or lower astral or extraterrestrial, all those things that we have these horrible judders when we mention them. These are also part of our environment. They're also aspects of us, which is difficult to swallow sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm partly something like that. No, it came from somebody else. That's not my stuff. It's somebody else's. On one level, that's also true. But if we consider that we are truly all unity consciousness and there is no separation of self, then we're also rejecting some part of ourself. Now, I've got to say, I did it for a long time and put everything into that space because it was easier for me to deal with it being outside of myself. A lot of my own personal journey, particularly since my challenging accident at the beginning of this year, which I have to say is one of the biggest, most painful, but the biggest blessings I've ever had. It forced me to stop, which was something I'd asked for. It forced me to stop for 3 months. I couldn't walk, had to heal. And what that did was it allowed me to rest. It allowed me to catch up on all the things I hadn't been able to do. Lots of books I hadn't read, lots of football and cycling, which I hadn't been able to watch, things that are my kind of normal ways of chilling out and relaxing, very mundane activities. And they have their own aspects too that are good and not so good. But I allowed myself to rest. And in doing so, I went on lots of deep meditational journeys, deep into myself, reflecting on the nature of the accident, why it had happened, which parts of my Stellar Nation DNA coding had come up in that process, my dragon self, my fallen angel self, things that I kind of had pretty much already integrated, but there were still some threads that wanted to show themselves. Now, that in itself is worthy of a whole series of movies, and it's not necessarily what I want to talk about today. But when we start to stop and become still, we start to go inwards more and more and more. And what you said at the beginning is so true. Nothing happens to us. It's everything that is in our external world is a reflection of our inner world. And I've shared this next story quite a bit, but in 2020, whilst we were supposedly having to endure all kinds of things, and many of us were supposedly locked up, I spent a lot of time in the forest in Wales, where I lived, and I spent a lot of time in deep meditation and had some very profound long experiences in the angelic realms, particularly with my boss in this work, Archangel Michael. And he sat me down one day under my favorite tree in the forest and said, okay, David, we need to have a look at something. You do realize that everything that is happening to you is you doing it to you.
Mm.
I don't know. I'm not sure about this. I think it's that guy over there. He's the crook. He's the villain. He's the one making my life a nuisance, or it's her fault, and da da da. And this is happening. It's like, well, yeah, that looks like that's what's happening, and on some level, that is what's happening. But why are you letting that happen? What do you mean? I'm not letting it happen. It's happening to me. Well, yeah, but why are you letting it happen? Because it seems like everyone else is okay with those people. It's just you that's got a problem with them. Okay, where is this going? So, the conversation went on for a bit. It was pretty uncomfortable for a while. And eventually I came to understand that he was correct. And he was pointing to me something very, very important that I spent the next 4 years up until very recently working on. And that was to start questioning why I was allowing these things to happen to me. Which part of me was playing the role of the victim? Oh, you're doing this to me. It's your fault. Oh, well, that suits a narrative that we run within ourselves, because it's easier to run that narrative than to accept that maybe somewhere in our soul, in our DNA coding, in our stellar nations, star coding, we can say that there are unresolved karmic issues that our soul wants us to look at. Now, we can keep breaking this down or expanding it in different ways as we want to, but ultimately a lot of this experiment from Creator is about understanding what it feels like to be separated. Not to be actually separated, because there is never any separation, but to create this experience that we call Earth and the human realm, to experience what it feels like to be separated. Now, bearing in mind that we're all aspects of all it is anyway, we're all aspects of Creator. So this is Creator creating it for itself and working through these various parts of consciousness that we somehow perceive are us. So a lot of this journey to being multidimensional is to break down the sense of self. Now, this is nothing particularly new. I'm not saying anything that's not already out there in many wisdom traditions, but having studied in many of those in shamanism, in Tibetan Buddhism, and having to work through these and having ego issues and personality crises and many things, and being very, very attached to my sense of self, it's been difficult to then understand, well, maybe I'm not David. David is just a vehicle for a much bigger being to have an experience, and not just one being really, but multiple beings, all of which somehow are part of what I perceive to be me, but actually also living their own experiences in their own rights. And I know that you've worked with the Stellar Nations material. Beautiful pathway. I highly recommend everybody to look at it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the only way to understand your multidimensional nature, but for me, it changed my life and allowed that to become activated. And when I really studied my Antares code, my fixed star astrology through my natal astrology, and studied the material of each of those different aspects, the unicorns, the angels, the dragons, the serpents, the whales, the dolphins, the birds, the Christ consciousness, all of which is representations of our Pleiadian, Arcturian, Nibiran, Syrian, and many other star system beings, is that first of all, I could see that I'd already experienced many of the difficulties. They'd manifested in my life already.
Yeah.
And that gave me the clues where to look to do the work. Now, this was already maybe 10, 12 years into a very, very deep healing journey that started back in 2010 in the pyramids of Egypt on the spring equinox in 2010. And when I think back to that point now, Lou, I'm like, I don't even really recognize that being. I'm like, well, that was David, because I've got the photos and Facebook to prove it. But it, first of all, doesn't look the same. And secondly, the more that I've got more into the work that my partner Bella puts out, the Mayan Time and Magic with the glyphs, and understanding my own glyph of being a cosmic skywalker, I started to realize why I'd always had a propensity in my life to go out of body, to do multidimensional journeys, to work with all kinds of substances, some plants, some not plants, to go into other realms of consciousness, because I found it easier to exist in those planes of consciousness than here in 3D. So part of the journey of the Skywalker actually is to become more 3D. And so in that regard, I would say perhaps those of us that have that particular glyph are more hardwired to be able to be multidimensional. And the journey of the Skywalker is to bring heaven down to earth. That's actually our mission. We can say a mission point. And so what is heaven? Well, I would like to suggest that maybe heaven is the fifth dimension. It's the place of non-duality, the place of the goddess. It's the place of pure potentiality and creativity. And if we can get past the dogma and rhetoric of various religious organizations that make it somewhat unobtainable and start to realize that it's just an aspect of ourselves that we can always access, then we start to understand that, okay, this is a potentiality that we are all now moving into. It's already here. I would say from my own meditations that we've been in a fifth dimensional consciousness since the full moon eclipse that we had about, I think it was the 17th of September. That really opened the door in many ways because we hit a pivot point that happened in the collective. Many of us doing this work for a long time have really been doing the difficult work of clearing the fourth dimension, the astral planes.
Yeah.
I know that you do a lot of this work. We've talked at length as colleagues over the years about this work, comparing notes, which is something I think we're going to talk a little bit about today because there are many themes that are coming up. So as is often the case with my talks, they seem to go all over the place, but they will come to a point of culmination at the end, I hope. And we're putting all of the pieces of the jigsaw together. And the next part I really want to say is about clearing the density. You know, this is, we can say that the lower astral realms are really the human emotional pain realm. There are many other things too. The astral realms have lower, middle, and upper aspects to them. And in the upper aspects, maybe sometimes when we're with wonderful plant medicine, we get to experience our God and demigod self, our mythological self, which is where the stellar comes in because it really allows us to access that.
Yeah.
That's great. Those are other aspects of our identities, but there's still somehow identities that we're attaching to. So there's always more that we can let go of, but that's okay. We can have fun with our higher astral selves, our Viking self, our Templar self, our goddess self, you know, all of these different fun characters. They are actually a part of us. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to put it all over Facebook and do all of that kind of stuff that some people get a bit involved in, but we can know on an inner plane that we have those characters, and those characters come to us because they exist on another timeline. We can say it's a past life, you know, I've just used the Viking one. That's one that many people have a connection to. So it could be within that Viking timeline, which very much links to the dragon energy and Mikael's energy, the white wizards. They come through the dragon and angel lineages. So there are aspects of the Vikings who were seafarers and farmers and did really positive things, great navigators of the stars. On the lower notes, they also did some pretty terrible stuff. You know, and then especially in Britain, we're still living somewhat under the laws of the Normans, who are the really, I would suggest in many ways, the fallen aspects of the Vikings manifesting. And we've been living under their laws in Britain ever since, all of which is about to be released. So we can start to understand our individual density and our collective density through these DNA codings that we are carrying. But we have to kind of explore them on the inner planes. It's, you know, I love reading, I love watching movies, but what I'm starting to see is that everything is related. It's like I watched the movie Noah again the other day, which was heavily criticized because it had stone beings and giants as fallen angels and many things that people thought were preposterous because they were attached to a particular belief system that movie didn't suit. Now, I've watched the movie 2 or 3 times, and I got to say, this time I watched it, it blew my mind completely. For lots of my own personal DNA was in that story. I've often had an affinity with Noah, and this is where we can really start to accept things that other people might think strange. It's well, like, what part of you, Davyd, looks like you have a connection to Noah? Well, that's not really for you to worry about. That's on my own inner space, but it's been manifesting in various ways throughout my life. Creating arcs for healing, creating arcs to journey from one realm to another, not just for myself, but other beings on the planet. That's my own personal inner work, but it's also being part of my work in service to bring heaven to earth. So the more that we start to work with our blueprints, we can say our natal astrological birth charts, our mind glyphs, our numerology, our cosmology from the Antares codes of the stellar nations. We come in with all of this information about ourselves. And through a process of inner investigation and Sherlock Holmes style sleuthing, we can start to investigate these higher notes, we can say, and these lower notes. And rather than trying to reject the lower notes because we don't like them, it's another way of saying I don't like a part of myself, it's much more, we can say, expansive to start going, okay, well, let me just accept that that is something that I was involved in this life, and maybe it's somehow reflected in my cosmology. Oh, there we go. Yeah, fallen dragon, fallen angel. Oh, God, that story's not so great, but I think I did some of that in my early youth. Oh, dear. So, you know, it requires total honesty.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part. And it's much easier as we started this conversation to say it's somebody else's fault. It's being externalized. You're doing it to me. So yeah, hopefully that starts to give more context to what we're talking about here, Lou.
Absolutely. It's just linking in with something that I think I said. This is the problem when I channel. I cannot remember exactly what I say. I can't remember if it's a channeling that I'm doing and just in myself going, ah, okay, or if it's something that I share publicly. But yeah, it was all about self-governance. So the blueprint that I want to bring in, the blueprint that I'm kind of like anchoring into and calling into the new earth is self-governance, which is radical honesty, radical responsibility, and this knowing that I don't need anybody to govern me. I don't need anybody to tell me right from wrong, good from bad, because I've played all those parts, and I'm okay with the fact that in perfect timing, I have played a variety of roles, just as an actor on a stage plays a variety of roles. And doesn't mean to say any one of those roles is the identity of the actor overall.
Right.
They are just roles that they've played. And once you get, and this is multidimensionality to me, once you get okay with that, then you can go, I don't need anybody to govern me because I've played both sides. I've played everything. I am everything. And therefore, I can make conscious choices, conscious decisions in the direction of flow that I want my energy to go in.
Yes.
In this lived experience, because I have all the knowing of all of those other experiences to hand within this. And again, there's no judgment. So, radical non-judgment, radical honesty, responsibility. And that enables you to come into that multidimensionality and state of being.
Yes.
Because it stops that kind of, oh, I was the victim, this person is a bad person, that person is a good person. It's like, yeah, that person is playing that role, but actually, I can't remember if this was something that we were talking before the call. Kudos to that person for playing that role in this lifetime, because everybody's hating on them in this lifetime. But actually, I know for a fact that the people in my life that have created the biggest challenge and what I would have seen living that experience at the time as being the bad guys and I was the victim to their behavior, were my greatest allies, were the ones that, from a soul perspective, love me the most. Those are the aspects of me that are like, I'm going to be here and I'm going to provide you with this experience so that you can grow, so that you can, navigate your way through from this very childlike perspective of that's a bad person, I'm a good person, kind of, it's all out there, it's not me, to actually taking on that responsibility for what you're experiencing in the world, the patterns that you're experiencing, or what you're seeing, and also takes away that I'm powerless to do anything about it aspect as well, that can come very much into the 3D.
Wow, beautifully said, and I absolutely resonate and concur with all of that. And this is, I think, the point that we're at, Lou, now, which is so important with this wonderful energy that's coming from the most divine of intelligences, the sun, the Ra energy, the sun god Ra. The more that we've been following one of our brothers, the wonderful Stefan Burns, showing us the weather reports, linking it to the astrology, now to the cosmology. It's like, we're understanding even through the beautiful dandelion plant. Dandelion is an aspect of the sun. He's also an aspect of a Syrian cat being, communicating with us down here from the cracks of the pavement. Let's remember where dandelion grows. This is a being who shows us through his own ability to transplant his seeds all over the planet, that he can adapt to any environment. The spirit of dandelion is a master geneticist. He's able to change his DNA at will to adapt to any environment that he finds himself in. Okay, so that's one of the reasons that worked with dandelion so strongly. I know that probably many people watching this video will know dandelion, maybe even have participated in some of our work on QPH with the dandelion. It's also one of the major beings that the Ascended Masters Act that our friend Janet Trelawa channels talks about. It was really the combination of that being and dandelion that actually precipitated all of the quantum plant healing work. And there was a reason for that. Having worked with many plants beforehand, including dandelion, dandelion came to me again when I first came to Mexico in late 21 after leaving Britain. And he kind of said, you know, I'm here to help be the architect of the 5D experience. I'm here to help you all get to that place. And he started teaching me more about this DNA aspect and being a geneticist, and showing through working with this being, first of all, divine timing. Everything is perfect. There is no good or bad moment. All you have to do is be in the flow and be not resisting. You know, and really, what is it you're resisting? You're resisting your own divine impulses, your own divine intuition. That's really where we have to do the work, because if things are not flowing for us, we have to look inwards and say, well, what is it that I'm blocking? Is it because my intentions or my attachments to certain things? I want this lifestyle. I want to have 5 Ferraris and a massive villa in the country. Well, great. Maybe that's your divine purpose. I somehow probably don't think so. But if we've got our heart set on something that is not part of our divine purpose, it's probably going to, especially over the last few years, have been showing up somehow as getting blocked from now. And if we're still banging our heads against that wall, we're probably starting to get quite frustrated and bent out of shape, which leaves us vulnerable to the other doorways that we have, which can often be karmic, and then start to manifest maybe in perceptions that we're being psychically attacked, which may be true. Maybe somebody's sending us magic. Maybe we've got an entity that we picked up down at the supermarket. That could all be true somehow in the dualistic world. But because we're not being in our divine flow with ourselves, we're laying ourselves open to all of the other stuff to come up. Oh, which, by the way, is actually quite useful, because it's showing us where we need to do our work. So the point I'm trying to make is one of Dandelion's biggest teachings, which is there's never any bad. There's just a subjective experience of duality, 2 sides of the same coin, as my Buddhist teachers love to always emphasize. And depending on where you put your attention, light or dark, there are different teachings. You know, it's like the light casts the shadow. Let's not forget that. Right, you know, and dark doesn't necessarily equate to evil, because the dark is the womb space of creation where we put a spark of fire and something flourishes. So which part of that is bad, right? We can say, well, maybe the light is more the sinister one because it's the one creating the shadow, you know, if we wanted to play with this a little bit more. So I use all of these analogies because I found them useful myself, but also as a way of breaking down our dualistic thinking, because when we're in that very dualistic way of looking at things, we lay ourselves open to being polarized and divided, which we understand now increasingly from watching the Gogglebox of the last few years, how that was done with the offered medications of 2020, with the so-called horrible things that were in our atmosphere, etc., etc. You know, and we got divided, those that did take medications, those that didn't, those that felt justified in having them, those that felt justified in not having them. You know, myself included, I was also in quite a divided space internally at that point, and didn't want to do work with certain beings because they hadn't necessarily followed the path that I thought they should have followed. And then I had to come to a place with all of these teachings from Mikai. I was like, why are you judging these people? What's it to you? Like, can you not just be in your heart and heal them either way, or help them to heal in either way? It took a while, I'll be honest, but eventually I started to open myself up, and I realized that I was being guided to think about this because of this very reason, but also because it was going to allow me to access information through my body medicine, through doing clearings on people that had had medications, to understand, it's like, well, why did these beings choose this route? I wouldn't necessarily say I have all of the answers to that, because it wasn't my pathway. But I did come to a place of accepting that other people had chosen different pathways. Some people weren't meant to be here for the whole experience. Some beings had just deported in temporarily to have a temporary human experience. And if I let go of my attachment to some of those beings who may have been family members or friends, I lost many friends during 2020, particularly my male brothers, who I never perceived were going to go down those pathways. And suddenly out of nowhere were telling me, oh yeah, I went to the queue down at the center yesterday, and I had my medications. I'm like, what? You know, and that was very challenging for me. But I've, over the last couple of years, come to a place of acceptance. It's like, well, who am I to say what's right for you and what's wrong for you? You know, it's just a journey, and it's a subjective experience. And the more that we start to play with all of this, the more that we start to expand internally and create that pathway to multidimensional awareness. Because, you know, without that, we're going to end up in a very, very divided, polarized world. And we can see that even as the old paradigm is really in its death throes, and I want to talk a little bit about that in a minute too, we're going to see the manifestation of it in our world as it still tries to maybe exert some final bits of influence over through polarity, through the projection of fear. You know, we're over here on this side of the pond right now, and we supposedly have a big hurricane that is about to wipe Florida off the face of the earth, apparently. Now, when I tuned into it yesterday, I was like, I'm not sure that this is even really a real thing. How much of this is a projection, you know? So to give two comparisons, according to some of the reports we see on the Gogglebox, looks like Florida's been evacuated. I'm not in Florida. I can't say for sure whether that's true. Maybe some of the audience who are there would like to share what is going on. I would like to get first-hand accounts before I make a call on what I think is going on. But what I can say is down in Mexico, where the Storm 5 supposed hurricane manifested, they're like, yeah, we didn't bother evacuating. It just flew past the coast. It didn't affect us. Is it real? Is it being contrived? Is it being projected to give us a sense of fear? If we are in that space, chances are that we're going to start giving it energy because it's a fourth dimensional emotional manipulation, right? And if we can see that being played out on the bigger scale, there's the micro and the macro. It's like, well, what's my internal storm that's manifesting? You know, I know you follow the Mayan wave spells, and maybe many people watching this video will too. And myself and Bella talked a lot about the last previous wave spell, which was the blue magnetic storm, a double magnetic storm in the year of the blue rhythmic storm. So that's a whole lot of storm energy, which can seem kind of scary. It's like, oh, maybe I'm going to lose something. I'm going to lose friends, family, house, cancel, delete. But only if we put energy to that is that timeline likely to start manifesting. But also, if we're still in the place of attachment to material possessions or other beings, that's not to say that we don't love or care about those things. It's great to have a house. It's great to have a vehicle that gets us from A to B. It's great to eat nice food. But if we're attached to those things to the point that it gives us suffering, we need to start having a look at that. And one of the wonderful Buddhist teachings that I share a lot, but I think it's so important, is that they say that all suffering is caused by either attachments or aversions. I probably even said this on previous videos. I think it's that important with you, Lou. And I sat and meditated on that for a long time. So I'm like, I don't know about this. It seems like another one of these Buddhist things that just sounds great. And I sat and meditated on it, and I said, well, what's given me suffering? And the more that I meditated in that way, the more I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it is down to an attachment or an aversion, something that I'm rejecting or holding on too tightly to. But if I don't reject it or hold on too tightly to it, I don't seem to be suffering with that anymore. Right? You know, so all of these different hints and tips are a way of freeing ourselves from attachments and aversions, but also freeing ourselves from identities that don't serve us. And the more that we do that, the more we allow ourselves to expand on the internal world into something much bigger. And that could, first of all, be more mythological, aspirational sides of ourselves that manifest through our DNA codes. But what's beyond that? Well, maybe a connection to all it is and creator. And so we expand fully back into being with creator and saying, oh, well, why did I want this experiment in the first place? You wanted to experience what it was like to feel separated, but also to feel individuated here in this very, very dense world. So we all agreed to all of that. We all agreed to be a good guy, a bad guy. And for sure, I do not enjoy seeing some of the revelations that are coming out at the moment. But for many of us, it's not that much of a shock. We've either experienced it somehow in our own way in this life or know people that have. And, you know, as somebody like yourself, Lou, who's done lots of work clearing this kind of stuff out of people's fields, magics, curses, abuses, all of those things, physical, astral. What I can say from my own experiences doing this work is that it's an endemic problem that we all experienced. I don't know too many clients I've had who haven't experienced some aspect of this, either consciously or unconsciously, either physically or astrally. And so I'm like, well, this is a pretty big problem. So how did this happen? Must be part of the experience, right? So once I let go of my own victim and, oh, this happened to me and this messed up my child and it messed up this and messed up that, all of which somehow I did live through and experience, I then started to say, well, what's the benefit to all of this? That's when I started to flip things within myself and started to, you know, and it doesn't mean I don't have a bad moment here and there occasionally where I suddenly feel like, oh, something happened to me, like my accident. That was my big testing point. How come that happened to me? Why did the hose break? Why did I fall off a ledge? Why did my heels explode? And why am I now lying in bed unable to move for like 4 months? Well, because it needed to happen, because my guides had showed me that there were still some pieces of work that needed to be done. and I needed to sit quietly by myself without interruptions. I had a carer that came in for a few hours every day, fed me wonderful food. So actually, I was like, you know what? This is better than hospital. I've got a big screen TV here. I've got my computer station over there. I've got all of my books. I've got a fireplace. I've got a coffee station with hot chocolate. I've got like snacks. I've got food every day. This is actually pretty good. And wow, you know, I get to spend it by myself, which actually, as a Scorpio, I don't mind. I'm better by myself sometimes. And you know, that allowed me to really to break myself down more and say, hey, am I a victim in this, or am I just receiving the biggest blessing of my life? Yeah, for sure. It hurt like hell, and I'm still, you know, taking painkillers and having to walk a bit with crutches. But, you know, I went from being not able to walk at all to being able to walk in 3 months, which was like 6 months quicker than anybody had expected.
Yeah.
Now, I then had to go back and do some retro work because my energetic healing had happened quicker than my physical healing. But what I was actually doing was creating anchor points in my future, telling myself, I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk by this point. Everything is divinely timed. And now that I'm at this point here in October, I knew back in April that this would be the moment that I would start to walk again pain-free. And I knew that it would be here in Texas and not in Mexico. How did I know all of that? Well, because I went into deep meditation, time traveled with some aspects of myself into what looked like the future, but it's just another parallel reality. And said, that's the reality I want for myself. And that's the silver thread that I've been calling ever since. But in order to make that a reality, I needed to reassure myself. So somehow after 3 months, even though I shouldn't have been able to walk at all, I was walking up and down the terrace outside of my room, much to everybody's surprise. Then something weird happened and I had to go back into a pain place because it turns out that my left foot was carrying a lot of karma. Actually, weirdly, and this is another of the amazing things, is I learned through doing the work with Bella that my cosmic mind glyph is the number 13, and it's actually represented on their system in the left ankle. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that's actually been preventing me being the fullest expression of my skywalking self, is a deep karmic wound from my dragon and angel selves that somehow is part of my own DNA coding that I hadn't integrated properly. I then had to go back into that, and yeah, it pulled out like black magic sigils and bolts and, you know, manacles, all representing slavery and the fallen aspects of myself. And I was still blaming some other beings for all of that until quite recently. But that process allowed me to accept that there was a much bigger story going on, and that the fact that I wasn't able to walk as quickly as I wanted to, or even had seemingly been able to, was not because it wasn't going to happen, but it was my higher self and the other aspects of myself saying, David, we still need you to have a look at this. You're still going to be able to walk in October. You're still going to be in Texas with your beautiful partner, all of those things that you want for yourself, but you can't jump ahead too far because you haven't done the integration and evolutionary work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking back to the time when I was paralyzed in 96. And it's, yeah, it's exactly, it's a similar thing. It's like, you know, you think, oh my goodness, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you when you're laid in a hospital bed with 45-degree glasses, not able to move anything at all. But then, you know, a week later I got feeling back, and I thought, right, okay. And I started sitting up, and I moved my way across to the chair, and then from there it was just, but that injury created a year for me of space where I went through that process of just looking at absolutely everything and taking responsibility for absolutely everything. And again, not with any judgment, because this work is not about, you know, looking at things that you may have said, may have done, may not have said, not have done. With judgment, it isn't. It's just acknowledging I played a part in that situation. You know, I drew that situation to me so that I could unveil, unravel, reveal this thing that I need to integrate, work through, that part of myself that is hidden deep within, that's got this big shouty voice and looks really scary, but actually I just need to kind of listen to what it has to say and, you know, bring it into the wider family that I am.
Yeah,
You know,
like that.
and sometimes that just needs space and time to do it. And that's why these experiences occur, to give us the ideal excuse, you know, in the 3D world where we've got jobs and families and this and that, and we can't just go, I need a time out because I've got to do some integration work. It's like, okay, Here, fall down the stairs, be paralyzed, have a year of wearing a Romulan collar.
Right. You know, we talked about this before because, you know, we shared these notes from our injury experiences, and I'm glad that we're able to bring this up because I think that what we're showing here, Lou, is that there is no bad. There's a possibility for all kinds of experiences. And one of the things that happened to me after the April 8th eclipse was I was on my own on this mattress on the floor in this big room in this old monastery building that's our house in Mexico. And I was like, you know what, this room could be really bleak for me for the next. It could actually be like a cell. It could be like a tomb for me. And for sure, I had many death experiences. I definitely did not come back from that accident the same being that somehow fell off that ledge. Some part of me did die in that and actually died several times afterwards too. All of which sounds totally like far out, but as a Skywalker, it's our natural preponderance to go through death and rebirth, particularly with being a Scorpio too. And once we let go of that identity attachment, even to the physical form, and understand that we actually exist on multiple dimensions all at once, I had to go through several experiences during that process of actually dying and leaving my body and going, oh my God, like I'm not in my body anymore. All of which was relatively natural to me, but there was still some unconscious fear about dying that I hadn't quite dealt with. And so some of it was an ego death. There was a series of ego deaths for sure. That somehow there was also a physical death that I had a very strange experience sometime shortly after the accident when I was in meditation. And I saw a video of myself with one of the other people I do videos with saying, oh, I have some really bad news to share. You know, my friend and colleague, Davyd Farrell, just died in an accident in Mexico. And I saw the video playing in my inner awareness. It's like, oh my God, that's really weird. But it was probably about, I think it was about 3 weeks after I'd had the operation. And what I perceived was there was a timeline where I'd actually physically died and it was moving away from me because I'd already accepted that I died. And I saw myself not as the being that managed to pull himself out of the empty fish pond and crawl on his hands and knees to find his phone, to call the ambulance and to call my partner, but as a being that just actually landed on his head, cancel delete, in the fish pond. I was like, yeah, how did I actually fall forwards and land an absolute perfect 10 on my heels, not break my back, not break my neck, not break anything, but completely fractured my heels? Now, here's the irony, and this is how Dandelion loves to play. He said, yeah, there was a part of yourself that you hadn't bought to heal yet, right? And it turned out to be true. There was parts of my DNA coding that I hadn't bought to heal. They were still rampaging a little bit, needing a little bit of massaging and reintegration. Now, directly before the accident, I've been guided to do a series of shamanic journeys with one of my sacred medicines, right up literally before the oak immersion. I mean, bearing in mind this accident happened on the second day of a global oak immersion that we were doing, but it happened on a day that doesn't exist, February the 29th. And it was the only time it could have happened because otherwise I was under the protection of the oak tree. And the oak had insisted with me before that particular immersion that we did. It said, Davyd, you need to finish everything. You need to integrate everything. So across those 3 journeys, the final piece I had to do was go into the underworld to haul out the biggest, baddest aspect of myself, the big dragon who was like, hey, I don't really want to leave. I'm the big dude down here, man. And I have a lot of power and a lot of say, and I can pretty much do whatever I want. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's got me into a lot of trouble in my life. And it's you. You're the culprit. And now I am pulling you out with the rest of my gang, which is my other DNA coding, you know, the other aspects of myself that have been integrated. And that being was not happy, man. I had to sit him down later there in that series of journeys. I had a big, like almost like Knights of the Round Table experience where all of these different aspects of my cosmic self all sat around the table discussing, okay, now that we've integrated everything, how are we going to move forwards? This guy was still, he was still unhappy. He was still, I not really want to be here. And I don't know why you pulled me out of the underworld. And a whole series of other things. And this is just my internal way of understanding, experiencing through journey work, through meditations, through actually talking to myself. Like, well, what are you doing down there, brother? It's like, you know, we are happy to integrate you back, but this demonic side of you, which is really what the fallen dragons are, is like, it's not helping me, it's not helping anybody. And I now am pulling you out because I no longer to consent to that part of me in any way, either consciously or unconsciously, in the astrals or in the physical, in any dimension, doing anything that is not serving me or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah.
That then precipitated a slight kickback, which is actually the part of me that caused the accident. Now, I could understand that, yes, there was a psychic attack, and yes, there were other forces, and there was an assassination attempt, and a whole bunch of other drama, which was easy to get into. But in the end, I realized that it was my dragon self on another timeline that had attacked me. I was like, hold on a second, how many other times have I attacked myself, the so-called inner saboteur? To my horror, it was all me doing it to me on multiple timelines. I'm like, oh my God. That doesn't fit my narrative well, because now I can't be the victim because it's me doing it to me, which is exactly what Michaela told me back in 2020. And it took me 4 years to integrate that through all of these different processes. Now, I share a lot of this with humor because I've had to laugh at myself a lot over the last 6 months. But what I'm sharing here, I hope, is how we can start to break down these identities and narratives that we've given ourselves, particularly a victim, which really doesn't serve us, because ultimately Mikai was right. We're just a reflection of ourselves, really, in multiple ways, and the universe around us, other people, family members, friends, colleagues, etc., they have taken it upon themselves as part of their contracts with us to show us as a mirror what's going on for us. And if we can actually start to use that as a collective tool, then we can see quickly how we're going to transform everything. So these are some of the ways of becoming multidimensional, but it requires, like you said, Lou, radical honesty, radical integration. And, that's what the sun is stepping up to do. It's no coincidence. The sun beamed two massive solar flares on Sunday morning when we were doing the biggest online astral clearing across the planet that we've ever done. And I was like, I feel like you answered my request there, boss. It's like, can we have a bit of extra help to transcend and transmute the density? Sure. How about two solar flares back to back? That'll do it. I was completely wiped out later in the afternoon while I was also integrating the codes. But at the same time, after that integration, which just took a little bit of a nap for half an hour and a bit of a rest and a nice coffee. And then I was like, boom, suddenly 4 hours of downloads kicked in, which was all of the next, revealing, we can say, of where we're going at the fifth dimensional level. So what I would like to share really is that the more that we do this inner work quickly, without judgment for ourselves, and certainly without judgment for anybody else, because it's really just about us. And like you said, Lou, I've seen so many people who have had accidents or things happen to them, and I was super blessed. I had so much support, maybe even from people watching this video. And again, I would wish to say so much thanks to people like my partner Bella, who helped get people on board, also to the wonderful astrologer Pam Gregory, all of the people that supported me with financial support, energetic support, love. There's no way that I could have survived that process properly without all of that. So I was blessed enough to have a lot of help. But as one of my colleagues also said, well, David, look how much you've given to everybody else over the last 10 years. Look how many people you've helped by being in service. This was your karma coming back to you in a positive way to help you with your lower stuff. So again, it's this kind of dharmic rebalancing.
But also, this is your universal self. You are me and I am you.
Right.
So as much as an aspect of ourself brings the situations to enable the revealing, the work to be done, another aspect of ourselves, or an aspect of ourselves, brings the support and the resources and everything to enable us to do that. It's like the yin and the yang. It's like we cannot have only one. We are part of the all that is, so we get the all that is. Whether we're able to fully appreciate or recognize those in the moments and take full advantage of them, that again comes down to what's within us that we get to kind of process and look at and bring and shed more light to. I can't remember how many years ago I was shown the round table. I do have Templar coding.
Many of us do.
I was shown the round table, and it was like, bring all aspects of yourself to the table. Let no door within yourself be closed to yourself. Allow everything to come through, no matter what it's appearing as. And that is the same as when I look out onto the physical landscape, regardless of how people are portraying themselves, regardless of their behaviors, regardless of, what they see themselves as, even. We are all one. We are all divine creator beings. We all hold a bandwidth of frequencies within our field, incarnated field, and we all exist beyond even those frequencies. So, it doesn't matter how people are presenting, and that includes ourselves. It's holding that awareness within that we are an aspect of the all that is. We're multiple things at any given time, and it's just allowing ourselves to detach, unplug from this physical form is me, and that's all that there is, to that much greater, much wider perspective of self.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that the whole purpose that we have come into physical form is to appreciate and to experience individualization, because the paradox of achieving unity consciousness is we have to master individualized consciousness
Right.
to begin with. You know.
That's what we signed up for. That's why we're here, and it's like there is a paradox. Everything really is a paradox. In the end, there is no either or, it's both. And I think that that's also something that's really important at this time. And also just to say, I think one of the things that I had to get over was being able to receive. And when I really allowed myself to receive the help that I needed, it came in buckets and spades from all directions. International community, people I never met before, local community. So many people showed up to help me that I absolutely needed. And I had to contemplate, well, why would this not have happened? And then my guys were like, well, because before you were running a victim program and were blocking it. You preferred to be a victim. Hey, this is really bad. This is happening to me. Da, 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 and look how terrible it is. What's actually going on in that? Well, that was much more unconscious. We can even say wanting to draw energy of sympathy, somehow slightly vampiric, which also horrified me. Oh my God, I've been participating in that too. Yeah, sorry to say that and a whole bunch of other stuff that you haven't really been able to look at. I'm like, oh my God, how much more is there? Well, how much do you want to see? I was like, okay, you know what? Let me see all of it. And that was my response in the end to Mikhail back in 2020. It's like, okay, boss, I get it. I get what you're showing me. Just keep bringing it on. He said, you sure? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Bring it on. My life absolutely imploded shortly afterwards. I left my tribe, my country, my relations, everything. The whole lot imploded. I ended up in Mexico, living on a ranch with people who didn't speak a word of English. I hardly spoke Spanish. A grandmother and her granddaughter, both curanderas in their own way, and really had to sit for 3 months by myself with all that I had left, which was 3 bags. Had to completely strip myself away to nothing, and then go, who am I? Oh my God, I think I'm a bit of a mess, actually. I thought I was doing all right after like 7, 8 years of healing. Oh, no, no, dude, you're still running massive inner saboteur programs, massive victim programs. And that was to my horror. I thought I'd already worked on those. Now, we can say that the energy of the last like 6 months is much more accelerated. And that's what the sun is here to do. He's here to help us with these precision strikes of solar flares. Because, what's interesting is I haven't perceived anything bad from these solar flares. I know that somehow there's a narrative out there that wants it to be an Armageddon and maybe the whole of the computer systems are going to blow up. Well, maybe if that's necessary to remove the last dregs of the old matrix, the overlay, the anti-grid, yeah, I can say, okay, well, what happens then if all of the financial systems go down? Well, a lot of people are going to freak out. I'm like, that actually feels like it could be freedom, because that financial system has not been serving us. And one of the other things that I really want to share with everybody, that there is an amazing quantum financial system that is completely encrypted, made of blockchain. I've tuned into it. I've had lots of teachings from beings that have contributed to that, not necessarily human beings, but minerals and metals and all kinds of beings that want us to have an abundant system that is not in service to self, but is in service to the greater good. I can't share too much right now, but I've seen it. I know that it's about to come online, but in order for that to happen, we have to let go of the attachment to our bank accounts, to things that we've been hoarding, things that don't even really exist. They're just numbers on the screen or bits of paper with things printed on them. What is that? It's only what we ascribe to it, which is some sort of energy form. That in itself is a program that we've been given, which if any of you have done the Mind, Time and Magic course that my partner Bella put together, we actually go way into the Gregorian calendar and how the Gregorian calendar was originally created by Julius Caesar just before the Christ consciousness entered our world with the age of Pisces. What was that for? To collect taxes. So that's then, and there's another weird part to that story, which I'm sure you know, Lou, and maybe other people too, but that's then codified by Pope Gregory in 1582 after they deleted, I think it was 15 days out of the calendar. Yeah, I mean, you can go and look this. It's written in the records. It's not a rabbit hole conspiracy. I was like, how do you delete 15 days? Well, because we're in charge of the matrix, so we can do whatever we want. And it's like, well, okay, well, I don't remember giving you the control of all of this. Where's my control in all of this? Well, and that's what got me much more intrigued into the whole Mayan time technology, we can say, And in fact, me and Bella were talking about this last night and saying, well, if we remove the Gregorian calendar and if we removed some of the social media, what are we left with? Well, we're just left with the memories of what we did in certain wave spells. So we know that when we've been tracking through the wave spells of the white dog, for example, we've been working with the heart energy. We're like, well, what have we done during that wave spell? Well, we did the quest to the quantum heart, and we did this and we did that. So our memories are now ensconced in our, we can say, our hard drives of our soul's conscious awareness, more linked to fractal time, not what we necessarily did every day or even necessarily what photos we took, but we remember the experiences we had at the heart level because that's the energy we were working with.
Yeah.
In a different way spell, working with the energy of the Skywalker, it was very, very multi-dimensional. So as we let go of the Matrix and everything that it's given us, which, thank you very much, has served us very well, this is in no way necessarily to say that the Sumerians who gave us the 1260 calendar did something bad. No, our upstream Anunnaki ancestors, our serpent DNA coding had to do that because it was part of Creator's wish. And so the so-called bad guys actually did us a favor to show us what it's like to feel disconnected down into the density. So this is just another mechanism to keep breaking down all of these belief systems that we've had. And, you know, what I would like to share maybe as we come into the final part of this hour discussion is just to remind everybody that the way to the multidimensional consciousness is something that we already have in us, but we just have to clear whatever blockages we have that are actually stopping us from receiving the abundance that actually is our, we can say it's our divine right, but we also have to understand what does abundance look and feel like. And it's not necessarily about having lots of zeros on a computer screen that somehow are linked to a bank. That's not what universal abundance is about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always makes me laugh. I've been invited to speak on you know, sort of like 5D business kind of talks. And one of the questions that they say is like, you know, what amount of zeros do you need to earn to kind of feel successful? And I'm like, I'm successful now. You know,
Right.
I live me, I live my truth. And to that is what success is. You know, if I want to do something and I want to go somewhere, then I can do it and go there because I know that my universal self is going to create and provide whatever it is that I need for that opportunity to arise, for the resources to come in. You know, it's so, yeah. I know before we came on the call, you wanted to just come and to speak to is it the new moon in Aries?
A full moon in Aries, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. And also just seeing somebody's put here in the chat box about 0 point, which is really, really important because what you've just, as always, with the mindset of us all connecting, we're all talking to each other, not just me and Lou on this call, but all of you listening right now, participating in the chat. We're all part of the conversation at the higher realm. And we've seen this increasingly, Lou, on our weekly astral clearing and teaching sessions, that we're all one mind. And as people are freeing the density, certainly from my perspective, I can feel other beings communicating with me at a telepathic level. Some of them I've done clearings with and done personal work in the healing space, so there's already a connection there. But I'm not unique in that. There's something that we can all do. But in order to get to that place, we need to remove the blockages. So the full moon in Aries that is coming up actually loops back to the full moon eclipse in Aries that we had on April the 8th, which was conjunct Chiron. In fact, it was a Chiron Cazimi. So myself and our wonderful sister, Leslie Shankman, who helped us lay out the Stellar Nations pathway. We did a series of podcasts on our YouTube channel called the Cosmic History Codes. And what had come to Leslie and myself quite strongly at that time was the series of Kazimis that were being lined up. And so Leslie tuned into that really strongly, said, I feel like our sun, as part of its own evolutionary story, is now, how to say, he's working on his own rebellious nature, because the story of our son, Solano or El Sol, was that he rebelled against his family, the Pleiadians, and came here and wanted to do it himself. Okay, fair enough. So we can say that's another macro aspect of ourselves at work, also the universe, but also disconnected himself from the rest of the universe. Not really, but somehow did, and then created all of this universe. And that's how the fall starts, with the dragons, the angels, and so on and so on and so on. So he went round all of these different planets and asteroids earlier this year, and one of them was the Cazimi with Chiron on that eclipse. Now, one of the things that I've really been studying a lot over the last couple of years is the nature of portals, eclipses, and how to time travel. consciously, not necessarily going into a spaceship like in Stargate, in the 3D, not yet anyway, but internally we have all of that technology. However, due to interference from, we can say, future aspects of ourselves, particularly the fallen arthropods, particularly the greys, they put microchips into our awareness, particularly on our pineal gland, that actually somehow distorted or turned off our time-traveling modulator, which is something we all have. Now, that's something we've removed from ourselves. We've been doing it on the clearings, on the Sundays. And as that happens, it allows this inner time traveling technology to click into place. Now, with the Mayan time technology that Bella's been sharing, we have a container in which to finally let go of the matrix without it suddenly being a bit like Saturn's been over this year in Pisces, which is all at sea. Saturn doesn't like Pisces too much because he doesn't know where he is. But he is grandfather time, and he's having a hell of a time, we can say, coming to grips with all of this. But also, that's part of that planet's own evolutionary journey. Saturn has a spirit, father time, Kronos, often given a bad rap as being malefic, like Mars. And like, these guys aren't bad. They've just got a different job to do. And if we can change our perspective into seeing that Saturn in Pisces wants to reconstruct our sense of self in the ocean of consciousness at the individual level, I'm like, thank you very much, Granddad. That's a good one. Thank you very much. We can work with that. So to come back to the full moon in Aries, when something gets eclipsed, like the one we had in April the 8th, it then has to loop forwards into our 3D awareness 6 months later on the next same full moon, but without the eclipse energy. Which is, I went on a whole journey for 40 days after that eclipse, a very powerful journey into the higher astrals, into the fifth dimension, very much in the energy of Noah and the Ark with Mother Earth, and seeing us travel through the universe on this celestial skyboat, which weirdly has started to manifest, according to the notes I made day by day, in the 3D. I made copious notes during that time because I was on my mattress and, meditating a lot. And I'm seeing literally to the day from the September the 17th eclipse, the same 40-day process playing out, except some things have changed because in that journey, lots of healing happened at the collective level, which then removed some of the more difficult things that should now be manifesting. There were many, we can say, disaster timelines. Unbeknownst to us down on planet Earth, there were actually only a very few number of silver thread timelines to New Earth because we hadn't done the inner work at the collective level. Now, with the work of many of the more awake beings on the planet, and maybe the 144,000, or however you want to see this, maybe there's only really 144,000 beings here on planet Earth because, as they say in the Mayan stuff, in Lakesh, I am another you. So really and truly, there's just one being here, really, I guess we can say, and we're all experiencing different aspects of that. So the reason that I wanted to bring this in, because I think that the 0 point that somebody's just put there in the chat box is really going to come into the manifest awareness on that full moon in Aries. And if we think about that, it's also conjunct Chiron again. We've also got Pluto about to move into Aquarius. So Pluto is literally going to go stationary direct, I think, in the next couple of days. And that's going to be, do you know when it is, Lou? I think it's the next couple of days.
It's the 17th.
Is it the 17th or the 12th? I know that it's around that period. And
it's around there. Yeah.
Yeah, we covered this in our recent Quantum Compass. So thank you. 17th. I think that, we covered that in our recent Quantum Compass show, myself and Bella. And what we were looking at was what's going to happen. Many astrologers are saying that that this is going to jump us into the Aquarian age once Pluto moves into Aquarius. Now, I think that that's quite likely, but I'm also tracking a few other things right now, which is the disappearance of our moon. It's not been easy to see in the sky for the last week. I did see it the other day, but then it disappeared again. But when I looked at it, it looked different. And the shadow that should have been supposedly how it looked before, it looked like someone had put a cardboard cutout over it. I'm like, what the hell's going on with that? So I did a bit of a deep dive, many people commenting on the fact that they haven't seen either the so-called second moon, which I think is really a spaceship in disguise, or the original moon. So I'm like, are we coming to this point where the astrology or the Western astrology that was intrinsically linked to the matrix, which absolutely supported the activities, we can say, of the elites of the Capricorn at the top of the mountain, the top-down hierarchy, is that now about to be removed so that we can make a different kind of a jump into a different kind of universe where the astrology and the planets are behaving differently?
Mm.
I actually think that we're at that point right now. And maybe what we're seeing is a switching out of one, we can say, construct in the sky, the moon, maybe for another. Maybe there isn't even going to be a moon anymore, because that's a whole nother rabbit hole in itself. Many of us might understand that the moon is where we incarnate from. It's the final point of incarnation. As beings, we incarnate down through each of the planets, picking up our karma, our astrology, until we come to the moon. Unfortunately, the moon, I think, was hijacked by some of these more nefarious 4D beings, and was actually a sort of a soul harvesting mechanism, which we would go in and then kind of, they would take our details, our birth certificates, our Tin Man numbers, all of that, which was basically a way of enslaving us at the astral level. That has gone. Absolutely. I've seen the collapse of the astral planes happening. Yes, it rules the tides in the ocean. That's also true. We can say that the collapse of the matrix, the old paradigm, has been happening at a rapid pace. And for those of us who are able to go into the astral planes and see it, it's been startling. And I've had many, we can say, like visual imagery of structures, buildings. First of all, they were starting to crumble. Then they had like a skeleton effect to them. This was back earlier this year. And then about 3 months ago, I saw all of them collapse down. As they collapsed down, I saw many rats running everywhere. I was like, where were you all hiding? Seems like you were hiding in the tunnels underneath. Now, if any of you have followed the rabbit holes, you know what I'm talking about. With the events of the recent eclipse, I can share that one of the things that I've been communicating with a lot is off-planet military, particularly Syrian military, particularly connected to the great feline beings. Lou, you'll understand this, and maybe other beings too. They have complete control of the planet, and they have the best surveillance equipment, because the higher codes of the cats connected with the higher codes of the arthropods for beneficial technology to surveil the whole planet. So there is nowhere on the planet now that these beings can hide. Every time they try to make a move, either to attack, create a chaos situation, maybe like the hurricanes, maybe like the so-called war situations, what they're actually doing is revealing themselves. Before, we had the fog of the astral planes, which was filled with magic that was protecting them. That has been systematically removed by lots of us on the planet, really doing our guerrilla tactics from down on the planet to remove the density of the astral plane. So finally, those of us who want to go and look, it's like you can see whatever you want in the astral planes right now. If you have removed your own density and have become light enough, it's like an open book. So it's easy to go into the Akashic records, extract information about ourselves, even about the very, very weird history of this planet. There is nothing about linear time and what we're taught in the history books that's actually really real in that sense. If we understand that planet Earth is really a reflection of everything that happens in the stars, the galactic wars, the different aspects of the stars, even Betelgeuse, that's worth a talk in itself. And for sure, I think that's going to play a part in what's about to happen. But everything that is happening and is about to happen is all for our own highest good. There is nothing here to be afraid of. I really want to reassure everybody on that point. I didn't believe that myself for a long while. So I think in my world, that was manifesting that way as disaster, Scorpio Armageddon situation, somehow which I was thinking was a good idea. And then I got to a point, it's like, that's not a good idea. Lots of people are going to suffer in that, you included, dude. I'm like, yeah, why am I doing that to myself? Maybe don't. Maybe think of a different positive timeline. So that was also part of my shifting. And again, Lou, I share all of these different ways of looking at things as kind of tools and techniques that certainly I've used. I think you've used too, and probably many people watching this, as a way of breaking down our sense of self, our belief systems. And as we do that, as we release the density of our shadow, we're able to receive more light codes, more of the light from the photon belt, all of which is really just another way of saying that we're remembering our true cosmic selves. And I think personally that's super exciting. And that's where I'm putting all of my attention and intention at this moment in time, and really fixing that 5D frequency for myself so that I can continue on that silver thread timeline, and hope that all of my brothers and sisters who maybe are not quite there yet, who are in pain or suffering, will be able to join us soon. So yeah, I think that's kind of it for today. I don't know whether we have any questions that people want to ask, or if you have anything you wish to ask.
Well, no questions have come up in the Q&A or in the chat so far, but I will give that offering out. If anybody has any questions that they want to put to Davyd, then please feel free. There's been so much that has been shared, but I think one of the main things is, for me, when you can look back And I know you've said it when you about the injuries and things like that, when you can look back with humor, when you can connect in to a lighter perspective of what's happened in your life and what experiences you've gone through. I mean, again, I look back at my paralysis as the best thing that ever happened to me in many ways, because it gave me that opportunity to really go deeply into the work. But I can now look back on that with humor, and it's bringing that lightness in. But that comes from going into those experiences without any judgment, acknowledging and accepting that we've all played the bad guy, whether in this lifetime, previous lifetimes, and to some extent within this lifetime, we have as well. And whether that is playing the bad guy to ourselves or another person as well, we've all done it. And so again, there's only love for the players in this particular
Right.
act that we're experiencing. Um,
Hmm.
and then we can lighten ourselves in terms of our perspective on things, and we can get into that lighter perspective overall. And then we can see the silver threads. We can connect into them, because our ultimate the spectrum, the bandwidth of the frequencies within our incarnated being is higher, and we're able to access. I mean, the beautiful thing is all of those people, and I give so much love and thanks to everybody who's done this work, and it doesn't matter to what degree you've done it. If you've done any part of this work to clear the density within yourself, to rise out of this, the victim, the self-sabotaging, whatever work it is, and it doesn't matter, you know, we are all the ones that have brought us into this place where the astral realm is so much clearer for us to navigate. The kind of they're showing me it as a spider's web
Yeah.
that has kind of held all of the things that have been going on suppressed and hidden, so that we couldn't see it. See, one of the biggest things for me is when you see something, rejoice. It doesn't matter how challenging that thing appears to you in that moment. It is a moment of rejoicing, because if you see it, you can clear it. If you
Yes.
see it, you are ready to clear it. And so really allow your heart to expand, really feel that rejoicing within yourself, because that is like the doorway is right in front of you then. And you can open that doorway and you can pass through it, go in, see what it is. It's just an aspect of yourself that may be shouting and having a tantrum, maybe crying in a corner. Don't know what it might be doing, but when you get that awareness, it is the moment to rejoice. From a physical perspective, it can look scary, it can look annoying, it can look all shades of the spectrum, but allow yourself to hold that frequency of rejoicing. And kudos to everybody. And I'm sure, everyone on this call, anybody who's connecting into this type of call, will have been part of the collective group that has enabled all of the energies that we're experiencing and the clarity that we're gaining to come to light, quite literally. So Tara says, I needed to hear this. I clear my contracts. I clear any contracts with those old controlling forces. Poof. Exactly. It doesn't have to be a long grind. And that was something else that we were talking about before the call. It can literally be done, gone. We don't have to make a big, 5-course meal of it.
Right. And I love what you said there, Lou. It's, by something being revealed into our awareness, and for sure, if we have the stomach or the mindset right now, there's a lot that we can see in the channels that are being revealed about the entertainment industry. And for sure, we know that it's going to go to the political world and to journalism and to, so what I would like to suggest to people is as that comes up, it would be easy to get really angry, to want to lynch people, etc., cancel, delete. That's not going to solve anything, because those people also contracted with us to perform those roles. And I know that there can be a sense of divine retribution that people might want to mete out. But it's like that doesn't serve any of us. If we can all come to that place of unity and say, hey, I'm experiences, at the individual level, I've had my own experiences, I've had my own judgments, my own self-judgments. And heck, I've learned a whole bunch from that. Thank you, everybody. for being the mirror for me to experience those things. I think that we're going to get through this a lot quicker. More people are going to make the jump much quicker, because ultimately the fifth dimension is unconditional love. And if we're not able to be in a place of unconditional love, then we're not really fully with our fifth dimensional selves yet. And there are some very easy ways to see this. It's like if we are getting into a place of vitriolic anger or judgment, or like, oh, these people and this and this and this. And yeah, for sure, there are many characters in the story that I can honestly say I don't like that much, but that's just my own personal reflection on the narrative that was created. But I also, like you said, Louise, like I've had to put humor into it and see some of these nefarious characters, if indeed it's still even them. And that's a whole other rabbit hole in itself. And who are these players? Are they real beings? Are they stand-ins? Are they clones? Are they actors? In the end, does it really matter? They're projecting a frequency. And what we're seeing is that the nefarious characters who maybe did have very ominous dark energies before, weirdly now somehow seem like humorous characters. Hence why we're seeing all of these weird clips of people who've suddenly changed height and different size. And I mean, I've seen so many humorous memes over the last week making fun of really seemingly quite serious things. I'm like, good, we're able to laugh at the absurdity of the narrative, and if you're trying to still make sense of it by watching the Gogglebox or even some of the alternative media is still a little bit caught in some of all of that. It's like, it's so absurd, it's so ridiculous. I'm like, this has to be the final act of this incredible play, because we've got to the point where I think the curtain is going to fall down and we're going to see the Wizard of Oz winding the machine. Oh, I think I've run out of reel now. Like, what next? It's like, oh, let's all go to the cosmic bar in the sky, have a nice margarita, sit and laugh about the whole thing, put our feet up for a bit and say, what next? Maybe we can get on with creating the new Earth that we've all been calling in, because that's the next step. And why would we not want that for ourselves first and foremost? But also, why would we not want that for everybody else? What part of us wants other people to suffer? And I think that that's the sort of thinking that can help undo some of the projections, maybe that might create some of the things that are in the news at the moment. It's like, well, if we can be in that place, we're completely undoing that energy in the astral planes. And at the same time, as we talked about on our Sunday session just gone, it's like, learn to live the inner ET, learn to live the inner fallen angel, because those guys also want to come. I've been surrounded by insects this week, things that I would normally want to push away. And they're like, hey, I thought you said that we all came with you. I'm like, yeah, not necessarily in my hair or on my shirt, but yeah, I've got crickets here, I've got mosquitoes here, spiders here. I'm like, they were like, hey, we're just making sure that you do really love us and that you're not rejecting us. I'm like, that's just that's just me and the insects, but probably there's a bit of us that's like doesn't like that inner narcissist, that inner ET, that inner grey. Because what are they? They're just an aspect of us from another timeline, another part of our own evolution. And for sure, some of these beings have caused untold amounts of seeming pain, but actually it's all just a perception too, because ultimately there is no pain. There's just a perception in the density, which is what Creator wanted to experience. And now we can say, all right, we've done all of that. I think that we can move into a place where we can still be multidimensional beings in a dense reality. Maybe not just with the pain bit anymore. It's not really serving us. We've learned from that. And if we can maintain that frequency, then I think we start to become the cosmic humans that we always wanted to be, the universal Jedi of the solar system, which I think is so amazing, because yesterday we started the wave spell of the double yellow magnetic human. So after the storm, the catalyzing energy, we're now moving into 13 days where we can really, with the sun's help, with our own inner work, activate our multidimensional cosmic human selves, which is really activating the 12 strands of the DNA with the magic 13, which then, if we go to a higher octave, actually allows us to shift to the 26th dimensional perspective. As our friend Zach, the Ascended Master, said, who is a 26th dimensional being, everything is up for grabs. And I think that that is a hugely exciting prospect.
And that is a beautiful place to end this conversation on. Everything is up for grabs, and it's up to us to reach out and take it.
Right. And to shape it into something that works for all of us.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Davyd. It's, as always, it has been an absolute joy to have you on the show. And as always, so much has been richly shared. So, feel free, people, to go back and listen to the replay. It has been streaming on YouTube, so that will instantly be available. I will edit and tidy it up and put it out in a few moments as soon as we get off this call. Now, moving into tomorrow's live call with Peter Tong, I'm really excited to hear what he has to share. Again, about the energies that we're experiencing at this time, and he'll be bringing in the aspect of the gene keys, and he's going to be looking at a particular profile. I think it's the profile of the 9th of October, which is actually tomorrow when his call will be. So I don't know what he's going to be bringing through about that, but we are working through and walking through interesting times. So walk through with a smile on your face, walk through with joy in your heart, and we are the creators, we are the navigators, and we are the cosmic Jedis. Fantastic. So much love to you, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you are in time and space. And I shall see you again tomorrow on another live call. All right then, my lovelies. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.